Immigration action. President Trump promises a move to strengthen the country's borders. We have the latest. Legacy of a legend. We remember civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. on the 50th anniversary of his assassination. She has all the ingredients.
And there's no better way to transport faith and love and affection than with food.
I sit down with celebrity chef Lidia Bastianich to discuss cooking and her Catholic faith. And Easter greetings. Pope Francis finds a unique way to send a message to Pope Emeritus Benedict. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, April 4th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump says the U.S. military mission in Syria is coming to a rapid end, but offered no timetable for a withdrawal. And at the White House press briefing today, an official says the U.S. remains committed to eliminating the remaining presence of ISIS. The news comes as residents in Raqqa begin to return home. They must rebuild their homes destroyed in the fighting against ISIS militants. The Trump administration says it will stay in the war-torn country to defeat the terror group, but the White House suggests that will not be a long-term endeavor. Meanwhile, the president is working with governors to immediately deploy troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. The White House says it's necessary to stop the influx of illegal immigrants, drugs, and violent gang members into the country. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are concerned with the proposal. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen says border security is national security. She briefed reporters at the White House before Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told me the cost of deploying the National Guard does not concern the president. He's standing by his plan.
Until we can have a wall and proper security, we're going to be guarding our border with the military.
Without congressional approval, federal law prohibits the use of active duty service members from providing law enforcement inside the U.S., so the White House says Trump will mobilize the National Guard.
This threatens not only the safety of our communities and children, but also our very rule of law, on which, as you know, our country was founded. It's time to act.
The president sees it as a temporary solution, but Republican Representative Francis Rooney from Florida says deploying troops to the border makes him uncomfortable.
Creating the possibility for an increase in violence and an escalation of the conflict. I mean, these people should be stopped at the border and vetted out, just the normal process. And we should have plenty of agents down there to do that.
Representative Ruben Gallego, a Democrat from Arizona, says the price of the president's plan takes money from those in need, like the veterans Trump promised to help. He tweets, using the National Guard to do border security is very expensive. For what it would cost the Guard to make just 2 arrests at the border, we could give a homeless veteran permanent housing for an entire year.
Sarah, thank you. Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego tweeted, using the National Guard to do border security is very expensive. For what it would cost the Guard to make just 2 arrests at the border, we could give a homeless veteran permanent housing for an entire year. What's your response, and how concerned is the president with the cost of sending military?
I don't think you can put a cost on American life. The president sees securing the border as national security issue and protecting Americans. If that congressman's so concerned, maybe he ought to show up and actually support legislation that would fix these problems instead of blaming the president who's actually trying to do something about it. We'd like to see him work with us in partnership and actually do something instead of just complain about it.
It won't be the first time the White House has sent military to the U.S.-Mexico border. President Barack Obama sent about 1,200 National Guard troops in 2010 to fight drug smuggling and illegal immigration. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons mixing it up in the briefing room. Thank you, Mark. China says it is considering imposing tariffs worth $50 billion on U.S. products. It comes one day after President Trump proposed the same dollar amount of tariffs on products from Beijing. China is targeting soybeans and aircraft. The tariffs do not take effect immediately. The news sent the stock market in both countries skidding when they opened today. But in a tweet, the president tried to allay anxieties. Quote, "We are not in a trade war with China. That war was lost many years ago by the foolish or incompetent people who represented the U.S. Now we have a trade deficit of $500 billion a year with intellectual property theft of another $300 billion. We cannot let this continue." President Trump now has the opportunity to shape what's widely considered the country's most left-leaning appeals court. It comes after the death of an unabashed liberal judge in California. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi brings us up to speed.
Good evening, Lauren. Judge Stephen Reinhardt died last week of a heart attack. His death opens up a spot on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He was 87 and still an active member of the court he joined in 1980 after being nominated by President Jimmy Carter.
Judge Stephen Reinhardt ruled the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance were unconstitutional, and his opinions favored assisted suicide and the redefinition of marriage. He's just one of the many judges President Trump has the chance to replace.
There are almost 180 vacancies in the federal courts right now. That's amazing because it's up from around 100 when President Trump took office.
Conservative court watcher Carrie Severino says the president is filling those spots with solid nominees.
My hope is just that we can clear up some of the partisan roadblocks in the process and get many more of them confirmed, because these are people who are going to be faithful in upholding our Constitution, and it really should make us proud as Americans.
This week, President Trump blamed Democrats for putting up those roadblocks, tweeting, "39% of my nominations, including diplomats to foreign lands, have not been confirmed due to Democrat obstruction and delay. At this rate, it would take more than 7 years before I am allowed to have these great people start working." But Democrats say the GOP didn't give a hearing or a vote to President Obama's pick to replace Justice Scalia during the 2016 election year. And they fear the president's picks will roll back abortion and gay marriage laws.
Senate Republicans engaged in historic obstruction to keep a Supreme Court seat open.
The judges that Donald Trump appoints to lifetime positions to the federal bench will be the lasting legacy of his presidency. He came into office determined to pack the courts with deeply ideological nominees who bring their own personal politics to the cases they hear.
When the Senate returns from its Easter recess Monday, they'll vote on several federal judge nominees. So far, the Senate has confirmed 29 of President Trump's judicial picks. More than 50 are still in the Senate confirmation process. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Police have identified the shooter on the campus of YouTube. They say 39-year-old Nassim Agdam had a long-running dispute with the online giant.
At this point in the investigation, it is believed that the suspect was upset with policies and practices of YouTube.
Police say she shot 3 people with a handgun yesterday before taking her own life. Her family says she was active on YouTube, where she promoted veganism and animal rights. They believe YouTube censored her videos. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is set to testify before Congress next week about how the world's most popular social media site collects and uses people's data. This follows allegations that the political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica obtained data on tens of millions who are on Facebook to try to influence elections. The chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee says the hearing will be held April 11th. Today, Americans across the country are marking the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. That includes Catholic groups who are honoring MLK's life and legacy. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from inside the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Catholic bishops are joining Americans across the country tonight by ringing bells in honor of Martin Luther King. The bells here at the National Basilica in Washington will sound 39 times, one for each year of MLK's life. It's one of many ways Catholics are celebrating his contributions to equality and nonviolence. Dozens make their way to the National Mall this morning for an interfaith service, followed by a rally calling for an end to racism. It was on this day, April 4th, in 1968, when the Baptist minister and civil rights icon was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. King was talking with friends on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel when he was struck down by a bullet. One day later, Pope Paul VI mourned the death of King, calling him a Christian prophet for racial integration.
Which Martin Luther King.
Pope Francis referenced MLK during his address to Congress in September of 2015, saying his dream continues to inspire Christians around the world.
I have a dream.
King's famous words are now part of the Holy Father's personal library. In March, his youngest daughter, Bernice King, presented the Pope with a volume of her father's writings. Bernice herself is recognized for her commitment to peace. She spoke in Memphis this week about her father's impact on his family and the nation.
He taught us the importance of embracing nonviolence, not merely as a tactic, but as a way of life in bringing about a more just, humane, and peaceful world. My mother used to always say that if we are going to really create the beloved community, there's no escaping Martin Luther King Jr.
The U.S. bishops praised Dr. King's Christian approach to nonviolence, saying that even in the face of years of ridicule and threats, his desire to do God's will outweighed his desire to live a long life. They say his life and death are a reminder to us that our faith calls for bravery. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the National Basilica in Washington. Buckingham Palace says Prince Philip, husband of Queen Elizabeth II, is recovering after a successful hip replacement. The palace says the prince is progressing satisfactorily at this early stage and is likely to spend several days at King Edward VII Hospital in London. The 96-year-old retired from public life last year. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip recently celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary. The captors of a Catholic priest kidnapped in the Democratic Republic of Congo want $500,000 to set him free. Father Celestine Ngonggo was taken by armed men on Sunday, shortly after celebrating Easter Mass in eastern Congo. Church officials haven't released whether or not the ransom will be paid. Rwanda's government has closed thousands of churches and dozens of mosques. The country seeks more control over religious communities. The East African country is 45% Catholic and more than 90% Christian. A Catholic church in Belgium was full after Easter, but it wasn't for Mass or a prayer service. People gathered to watch workers switch this 13-foot painting behind the altar. Employees used antique cranks, weights, and pulleys at St. Charles Borromeo in Antwerp. It took 15 minutes to take out the raising of the cross and install Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Mainstream media are still abuzz over the Holy Father's alleged comments about hell. An Italian journalist claimed last week Pope Francis told him sinning souls disappear, but hell doesn't exist. And that report set off a controversy in Italy and around the globe. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, who is this journalist and what are his claims?
Eugenio Scalfaro is the editor of La Repubblica, a left-leaning national newspaper in Italy, and it actually is the one that the Pope reportedly has said he reads. It's the only Italian daily that he reads. Now, Scalfari is known to be an atheist. He's 93 years old, and he doesn't record his interviews, but as a matter of fact, this wasn't an interview. It was a pre-Easter meeting, but the day after, what appeared in the newspapers was direct quotes of the Pope allegedly saying that hell doesn't exist, that evil souls they disappear, they don't go to hell. Now, this is about the 5th time that the Pope and Scalfari meet, and every time there seems to be a misquote or a misunderstanding. So many within the Vatican press corps are actually wondering how it is that the Pope continues to meet this controversial figure.
This happened last week. What has the Vatican's response been? Do we have anything from them?
Absolutely. The Vatican pretty quickly issued a statement saying that this was not an interview, it was a meeting, it was just a chat if you want, and that anything that appeared in quotes was not to be taken as a transliteration of the Holy Father's words. They were not direct quotes. Now, Pope or not Pope, this completely goes against any basic ethics of journalism, Lauren, putting into inverted commas what a person has not necessarily said.
Reporters who cover Pope Francis say the comments are highly, highly unlikely. Why is that?
Well, the Pope has often spoken about hell. He's often spoken about the devil. In 2014, he mentioned hell when he was encouraging mafia members to convert. In 2016, he said that those that don't open their hearts to God are condemning themselves to hell. So rather than perhaps this being a shocking papal statement, it is just perhaps irresponsible reporting on behalf of a journalist who is a self-declared non-believer.
An atheist, right. All right, Juliet Lindley, thank you so much. EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, the first course, part one of my discussion with celebrity chef and Catholic Lidia Bastianich. Celebrity chef Lidia Bastianich owns 6 restaurants, hosts a TV show, and is a best-selling author. But she's also part of today's Catholic Woman. She cooked for Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. In her new book, she describes her early life in communist Yugoslavia and her journey to the U.S., courtesy of Catholic Relief Services. I had the pleasure of talking with Lidia earlier today about food, fun, and faith. Welcome to the program. Author of My American Dream, A Life of Love, Family, and Food. This is just one of how many books that you have written?
Well, it's the 12th, actually. But this is different. You know, usually mine are recipe books. And this is kind of my story.
And what made you write this?
Do you know, I began to realize that in the cooking show that I do on PBS, people wanted to know the setting of that recipe, wanted to know more about the story, wanted to know, where I learned it, wanted to know how our family enjoyed it, and I am delighted I did.
Today, children are often disconnected from families and from food. They're connected to devices and technology. How can cooking connect families and connect generations?
Well, we're running forward so fast. Let's go a little backwards. Let's go back to the table. Let's go back to the unity of the family. Let's go back to those delicious smells that happens in the kitchen. Even if you're a young child and you're doing your homework, and I remember in your room, and then the smells waft into your room, all of that. And it's a question of bringing that back. It's a question of bringing those smells back into the house. It's a question of setting that table. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate table or an elaborate meal. A good, honest meal that is nutritionally sound. It's not just opening packages or whatever. And it doesn't take...
I'm starting to feel very bad.
I
open a lot of packages.
It's okay, but you can redeem yourself.
Okay. You are going to have to give me a lesson in how to do that. It's hard for families to get together for a home-cooked meal. What are 3 or 4 of the ingredients that I need to put into my refrigerator to make those sort of basic, honest foods that you're talking about?
Well, like a base, let's say a condiment. Olive oil is always good. Onions, garlic, whatever, those you always have. And then, seasonal vegetables, leafy vegetables, you clean them, you put them in a pan with some garlic and oil. What are the starches that you could bring? Pasta is one, then the sauce. You can do vegetables, tomatoes, and then the proteins. Choose a proteins that's quick. If you're going to choose a piece of meat and you want to braise it and roast it, leave that for the weekend. But like a chicken breast, a nice thin slice of veal or fish, a nice piece of bass or shrimps, that doesn't take long at all. And it's okay if it's halfway prepped. If you buy a nice rotisserie chicken, you bring it home, but then you have vegetables around it that you make and whatever, and that's okay too. And frozen vegetables are okay too. I'm not predicating here that, you have to put that apron on and be there 2-3 hours. You can facilitate. Just be conscious and get that kind of smell and cooking feel in the kitchen and put the table up.
Do you ever get tired of cooking and say, hey, let's just order Chinese?
Oh, I love Chinese food.
Me too.
I get that too, but I love cooking them.
I know that your faith is so important to you. Is there a way to put faith actually into cooking?
Cooking and food is a transporter, or it's a great setting for faith. I think you cook with faith. You know, you got to be grateful for the food that we have. There's a lot of people that don't have. Then the thoughts come, well, you know, maybe we should share with the people that do not have. And all of that kind of elements of faith and belief and just being humanly kind of given is all connected, and it's connected with food. And there's no better way to transport faith and love and affection than with food.
Tune in tomorrow for part 2 of our interview with Lidia. She tells us about the nun who helped her discover her faith and if her cooking was a hit with Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. Up next, sending good cheer, Pope Francis delivers a message to his predecessor at his weekly talk at the Vatican. And spiritual coach, we talk to the chaplain of the national champion Villanova basketball team. A federal court tells the Trump administration the government can't interfere with the ability of pregnant immigrant teens held in federal custody to obtain abortions. The director of the office overseeing those in custody, who is a Catholic, believes those in his agency's care have no constitutional right to abortion. The government can appeal the judge's order. You can read more about this case right now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Pope Francis says Easter brings us joy and happiness, and so do flowers. Today at St. Peter's Square, it was filled with 50,000 tulips, orchids, and daffodils.
I fiori dicono gioia, allegria.
The plants are part of a decades-long tradition by the Netherlands to donate flowers to the Pope. At his weekly talk at the Vatican, Pope Francis also sent an Easter greeting to Pope Emeritus Benedict, whom he says was watching on TV. The crowd cheered at the Pope's request. A parade in Philadelphia is set for tomorrow to celebrate Villanova University men's basketball 2018 national championship. Father Robert Hagan is the team's chaplain, and we see him here cutting down the net after the Wildcats defeated Michigan 79-62 earlier this week in the title game. Father Hagan says the team represents faith, perseverance, brotherhood, and strength. And just aren't we lucky? Here he is back from celebrating that championship win in San Antonio. Father Hagan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here. We're thrilled.
You're the team chaplain. What did you tell your team right after they won?
Well, you know, after that we won, we did what we always do, and that would have been win or lose. We join hands in that locker room and give thanks to God for the opportunity to compete. And we use our gifts to the best of our ability. And on that night, you know, we happen to come out on the right side of things. And we're just so blessed for the example that team is. Perseverance, as you said, brotherhood, sticking together. And these are the kind of values that we want to take out of that locker room into the rest of our lives. And we talked about how we're really bonded and united in that spirit long after Monday night.
You know, you have a compatriot chaplain, team chaplain, Sister Jean. She's the 98-year-old chaplain of Loyola Chicago. Both of your teams made the Final Four, and Sister Jean delivers pre-game prayers, and she delivers post-game emails as part of all of her encouragement. It's part scolding, I don't know, a little, encouragement. What is your role? Do you do those kinds of things as the Wildcats chaplain?
Yes, I think as chaplains, we all in our own way have opportunities to connect with them officially in ways of prayer and prayer services, which we do. And then also informally, just building relationships, whether it's sitting on the bus or in line at a buffet, seeing them come in and out of the training room, treating for injuries. You have opportunities to connect with them in daily life. Maybe offer them a word of encouragement, maybe an ear to listen to what might be going on in their life, and just kind of walk with them together. And I really do, on a personal note, have great respect for Sister Jean and all that she represents. She did a wonderful job of really highlighting these values that we all share and so many people try to live. And she really put them up on the big stage for for inspiration for all of us.
And she has a bobblehead.
Her years of service and living her vows. I know.
I mean, come on, where's your bobblehead?
Yes.
Don't you have a bobblehead yet?
No, and that's quite fine by me.
Well, you're also not 98, so maybe you win a couple more championships.
No,
you
got some,
you get socks with your face on it.
Some more years to go.
I know you went to Villanova. You went there and they won then, and then you have two others that you have where the team has won. Are you their good luck charm?
I am most definitely not their good luck charm. You're right, this is my alma mater, so I'm very blessed to be working and serving at my alma mater as an Augustinian. And I think whether it's from Jay Wright or our athletics director, Mark Jackson, or our president, Father Peter Donahue, there's a real convergence of faith and culture and academics. And so these Augustinian values that we strive for are not just something that we kind of strive for on Sunday, but we try to bring into our, Monday through Saturday.
Yeah, that's right.
And
well,
certainly
you've done a
these
great
young
job,
men
Father.
incorporated those on the court.
We've got to go. We're going to have to leave it there. Congratulations to you and the team and the Wildcats. Father Rob Hagan.
My pleasure.
And that does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless.